Tonight's guest speaker is Dr. Mark Kaplan. So without any further delay, take away, Mark.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to apologize for the delay. It's not something that I planned for, but it kind of reminds me, growing up in the Jewish community, we had a reputation for always starting things late. And there's a comedian you may have heard of named Woody Allen, and he said, I've spent my life trying to arrive late for Jewish occasions, and I've never succeeded. Anyway, hope you like that comment. I want to share some information with you. Some of you may be aware of, some of you perhaps not, or maybe it's been a while since you've heard about it. I'm calling this talk The Bible Beneath the Surface. The Bible Beneath the Surface. I began teaching about I want to thank Donnie and Peggy, anybody who had a hand in allowing me to give this presentation. I appreciate it. Appreciate those of you who are taking the time to listen, or those of you who may want to listen later if it's recorded. But I've been teaching about the Bible since I was a teenager, and now I'm 79. So hopefully I've learned something. So later on we can have a Q&A and discuss whatever you care to discuss. Back in 1970, I was in Jerusalem studying, and there was a colleague with me. He was a teacher, and he was studying over there. And we used to talk about technical things in the Bible. And he told me we could put out a booklet, what you don't need to know about the Bible. But actually, the more you know about the Bible, the more familiar you are with it from every level, the closer you are to the author. You see, you could complete a course of study and get a 3x5 card with a printed message. Congratulations, you've completed this course of study. Or you can get a beautiful parchment with beautiful script that you can frame. So the information is the same, but it's so much more effective when it's presented in that very beautiful way. So the Bible is not only, as it says in 2 Timothy 3, which I'm going to read, and you're very familiar with it. Before I begin to read scriptures, I want to say that when I do a Bible study, I have two mottos in mind. Each of them has 9 words, and you may be familiar with one or both of them. The first one is, the Word of God is the foundation of knowledge. The second is, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Now, you can't do that with the Bible, but I can give material that is often uncovered, or not covered as much, put it that way. So anyway, I want to go to 2 Timothy 3, and here Paul writes to the Apostle Paul writes to the evangelist Timothy, and that from childhood you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith which is in Christ Jesus. Now at that time they had what they call the Old Testament, what Jews call Kitvei HaKodesh, the Holy Scriptures, which is the term used here, or often they use the acronym Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Law, Prophets, and Writings. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped to every good work. But it was also presented in such a beautiful way, such a magnificent way, such a profound way, that there are agnostics who spend their lives studying it. Just partly, at least, or a lot of it is the value of the literature itself. And I go now to Psalm 12, and I wanted to read another comment the Bible makes about itself. Okay, Psalm 12. And for some reason, I'm wanting to skip. Here we go. So I want to read what it says about God's word in Psalm 12:6. It says, the words of the Lord are pure words, like silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. You shall keep them, O Lord, you shall preserve them from this generation forever. So God has seen to it that, of course, his word has been preserved. The Hebrew-speaking world has preserved the Old Testament. The Greek-speaking world has preserved the New Testament. They're the ones that decide what's in the Bible. Other people don't decide. The Jews decide and the Greeks decide. That's a separate subject, but I thought I'd bring that out. But anyway, I want to talk today about some of the what you can get in the Bible when you go beneath the surface, how the Bible was intended to be very impactful on its audience, and how it intended to bring out messages in all kinds of ways, in on many different levels, according to many different interests. Whatever your interests are, there's a way to study the Bible that would, bring out that interest in you, and you could apply it then to the scriptures. So the first thing I wanted to bring out is that wordplay can make something more impactful emotionally or help you remember it. And that you like puns or words that rhyme. And the technical term for that in the Bible is paronomasia, Parono, paranomasia, P-A-R, para, and then para, and then paronomasia, P-A-R, and then O-N-A-M-S-I-A, para, and paranomasia. That makes sense? P-A-R-A, and then N-O-M-A-S-I-A, paranomasia. You with me? And so I'm not getting comments. I guess I don't hear them, but that's okay. But hopefully, if you're not clear in the Q&A, we can clear it up. So paranomasia is a technical term for the wordplay you find in the Bible. And a person listening to the original text would be affected emotionally. Now, we have speakers in America in English, and most of you, I presume, are in English-speaking countries, or you know English. And so we have speakers, for example, who'll say, we don't want to go from ballots to bullets. See what I mean? The words are somewhat similar, so it makes an impact on you, and maybe you remember it. Or back in the days when we had the Bush family, we had President Bush, and then we had another President Bush, and then we had a governor, I think it was a governor of Florida, but he wanted to be president, and his name was Bush. So some speakers were saying, let's get out of the bushes. It had a double meaning there, and it was cute. And depending on your politics, you either liked it or didn't. But there's interesting examples of that in the Bible. And I wanted to give one from the New Testament. I want to go to Hebrews 5 and verse 8. And I'm going to go ahead first and read it in the just in the English translation. I'm using the New King James, but whatever translation turns you on, but I'm using the New King James. I want to go to Hebrews 5 and verse 8. Okay. Okay, so it says that though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. So it's a powerful verse. But if you're reading it in the Greek, which I'm going to do in a moment now, it says, emathen af hon epathen. Emathen af hon epathen. So the words stick out at you. Emathen, he learned Avhon epathen he suffered. He learned from the things that he suffered. And so those two words, emathen, epathen, they hit you. And if you're hearing it in Greek, it makes more of an impression on you. See what I'm saying? And that's the kind of thing you find a lot in the Bible, but you don't see it in the translations. You have to go back to the original words to see that, but there's some cases where it makes a difference in how you understand. In that case, it's just a matter of impact. But in some cases, you wouldn't understand the verse if you didn't go beneath the surface. I want to give an example of that now in the book of Jeremiah, and I'm going to use a Jewish translation so that I can look at the Hebrew as well. But whatever translation you want to use. But I want to go to Isaiah 1 and all right. So I think I want the eighth verse. Isaiah 1:8. I'm sorry, Jeremiah 1:8. I'm looking for it here. So here he says, the word of the Lord came to me. It came to me. What do you see, Jeremiah? I replied, I see a branch of an almond tree. I see a branch of an almond tree. Now, the almond tree in Hebrew is called a shakade, shakade in the Hebrew. And the root shakad has to do with being alert, being diligent, you know, being wakeful. And some of you may remember a Dwight Armstrong hymn, "In Vain You Rise, Your Morning Break." I want to go to the Psalms, and I want to go to Psalm 127, and you'll see that word there, and a psalm that a lot of you are familiar with. As I said, some of you used to sing it as a hymn. Um, but in Psalm 127, it says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain on it. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman keeps vigil in vain. And the word for watchman is shakade here. It looks like. So it's or it's I think the word is shakad actually. Shakad, yeah, the word is shakad. So it means the watchman has watched. Shomer is the watchman. So shakad shomer shav. The watchman in vain, or let's put it this way. In Hebrew, the verb often comes before the subject in the Bible. So it's shakad shomer. The watchman has been diligent, has been watching, has been alert, shav, in vain. So the word here is shakad. So why is an almond called shakade? Because of the trees in the land of Israel, the almond tree blossomed early. It blossoms in the middle of the 11th month on the Hebrew calendar, which is before the spring. So it's the first sign of coming spring is the blossoming on the almond tree. And because it blossoms early, so it's in a, like more diligent, more alert than the other trees. So it's called a shakade. So then if you keep reading, he says, and the word of the Lord came to me a second time. What do you see? I replied, I see well, no, I don't want to go to the steaming pot. I want to go back to the almond tree. So here where he talks about what he's going to do about the almond tree. Um, okay, am I in verse 8? Okay, and I'm trying to find where he actually goes back to the almond tree. Maybe it's in the same verse. Let's go back to verse 8. Maybe I didn't finish reading it, or maybe okay. Let me see. Let me go back to verse 8. I see a branch of an almond tree. Yeah, I just never read the whole verse. The Lord said to me, "You have seen right, for I am watchful in to bring my word to pass." So, and there the word is shokade. It's the same root. He's saying, you see this shakade, this almond tree, and I'm going to be shokade. I'm going to be diligent, quick, alert in bringing about this punishment. In other words, the time has come now. You're near the time when the punishment is coming. So you don't see that in the translation. You don't see the connection between almond tree and the fact that I'm going to be watchful in bringing my word to pass. What does it have to do with an almond tree? Well, if you go back to the original Hebrew, you see you see the connection. So hopefully you're following along with this. So he showed him a shakade. He said, because I'm going to be shokade in fulfilling my word. All right. Now there's another example of that, and for that I want to go to Isaiah 5 and verse 7. Isaiah 5 and verse 7. And again, it talks. You see the emotional impact when you're reading it in the original. Isaiah 5:7. And he says, "For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the seedlings he lovingly tended are the men of Judah. And he looked for justice, but behold, injustice, for equity, and behold, iniquity." That almost rhymes. That's pretty good translation there. But in the Hebrew, it says that he uh, by Vayikav lemishpat, and he hoped for justice. Vihine mispach, injustice. So he wanted mishpat, and he got mispach, injustice. So it has more of an impact on you because the words are very similar. And then he looked for litzdaka, he looked for tzedakah, righteousness, but he got tzedakah, he got a cry. Okay. Litzdaka for righteousness, vihine tzaka, a cry. So again, iniquity and equity work pretty well here. He looked for equity and got iniquity. That's actually a rather clever way of maintaining that and going into the English with it. Are you still with me? So you see that under the surface in the original language, the message is even more impactful in the fact of the wordplay. Okay, now that comes out also in the book of Amos. And I'll go back to the NKJV for that because it's just a matter of a couple of words that are similar. So if you go to the book of Amos and you go to the 8th chapter, and this ties in, by the way, with the Olivet prophecy that I'm going to get to in a moment. So I go to Amos 8 and verse 1. Okay, Amos 8:1. The Lord God showed me, behold, a basket of summer fruit. The Hebrew is just a basket of summer. Kayetz is the word for summer. A basket of kayetz, summer, meaning summer fruit. All right. And he said, Amos, what do you see? So I said, a basket of summer fruit. Then the Lord said to me, the end has come upon my people Israel. What's the connection between that and summer fruit? Well, see, because if you go back to the original language, the word for end is kates. So he said, you saw kayetz because I'm bringing the kates. I'm bringing the end. You saw summer fruit and I'm bringing the end. And so the Hebrew words ring out, kayetz, kates. All right. And so under the surface in the original language, it has that impact on you. And now you see the relation, why summer fruit has to do with the end. Are you with me? Because now we're going to see how Jesus Christ used it in the Olivet prophecy in Matthew 24 and verse 32. I want to go now to Matthew 24 and verse 32. See, you could be saved without necessarily this information, but it just helps you appreciate the Bible more. You develop more reverence, more respect for the Bible when you see how deep and profound it is on so many different levels. I want to go to Matthew 24. I want to go to verse 32. And now he says, by the way, and this is related to Matthew 24:32. What are summer fruit? Well, one of the major summer fruits are figs. Figs are a major summer fruit. So when you think about summer fruit, if you're in Israel, in Bible times, you think of figs. Are you with me? So here Jesus says in Matthew 24:32, now learn the parable from the fig tree. When the branch has already become tender and put forth leaves, you know that summer is near. Okay, because the figs are a summer fruit. And so when the fig tree begins to bear fruit, you know that summer is near. So also when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. So know that the end is near when you see these things that I'm prophesying here. So in other words, when you see the kayetz, when you see the summer fruit, know that the end is near. See, his apostles would have known the book of Amos. They would have had sufficient knowledge of Hebrew to get this point. See what I'm saying? So even though this is preserved for us in Greek, he was speaking in Aramaic to people who had a knowledge of the Hebrew Bible. And so he was making that play on words that God made with Amos. I hope you're understanding. If I've confused you at all, I certainly don't want to do that. I want you to in effect understand more deeply the scriptures, not to be confused. So any questions, we can do it maybe in a Q&A. Now I want to show you another one that you miss, even if you know the Greek. Even if you know the book of Matthew in Greek, you still miss it because it goes back to the discussion that John the Baptist was having at the time. And he was speaking Aramaic to people who had a fairly basic knowledge of Hebrew. He was speaking to people who had some knowledge of the Hebrew Bible, as of course he did. So I want to go to Matthew 3 and verse 9. Are you with me? Hopefully a lot of you are following along in your Bibles. Matthew 3 and verse 9. And here he's speaking to these religious leaders. And we in the Jewish community, some of you understand, some of you know, I was Haredi, I was ultra Orthodox, and long time ago, I walked out of the ultra Orthodox yeshiva, and on May 6th, 1968, I attended my first Bible a Friday night Bible study with Christians. That was back in May 6, 1968 in Manhattan. But before that, I'd been in a ultra-Orthodox yeshiva. But anyway, he's speaking to people with that kind of background. And he says in Matthew 3 and verse 9, and this is what I wanted to talk about. We in the Jewish community, the Orthodox Jewish community, we felt very privileged because we had Zechut Avot. We had the merit of the fathers. We were the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And therefore, we had in effect a different spiritual standing, and therefore we had all of the rules in the Bible, the 613 commandments. We had to keep all the commandments of the Bible, and we would have a greater reward on the other end. Now Gentiles who didn't have Zechut Avot, they only had 7 commandments to keep, basically the 10 commandments without the Sabbath, and they would get a reward, but not as good. Are you with me? So it was very important to think in terms of Zechut Avot, the merit of the fathers. Of course, once you convert to Judaism, then of course you get Zechut, you have Zechut Avot. You have to convert to get it, though. You still with me? So anyway, so John the Baptist says to them in verse 9, he says, "And do not think to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father. But I say to you that God is able to raise up children to Abraham from these stones." And so he's speaking to people that know the Hebrew Bible. So the word to build in Hebrew is bana, and the word for son is ben. A lot of you know that. A ben is a son, and then banim are sons or children. And the word for stone is even. Even is stone, and it's the same Hebrew letter. Sometimes it's pronounced as a B, sometimes as a V. For those of you who are more familiar with Hebrew, it's bet with a dot and bet without a dot. If you're reading a translation of the Bible in English, if you see a B at the beginning of the word, that's a bet. It's pronounced as a B. If you see a B at the end of a word, that's a vet. It's pronounced as a V. So, for example, cherub in English is keruv. So it's pronounced as a V. Okay. If you see a double B, that's pronounced as a B. So Shabbat, Sabbath has 2 B's. Is everybody with me on that? Just a little bit of a talk about Hebrew pronunciation. So in the Bible, like Bethel, there it's a B. But if it ends with a B, just 1 B, then it's a V. But if it's a double B, it's a B. But it's the same letter in Hebrew, just with or without a dot. So he's saying, I can take Avanim and make Banim to Abraham. So it's very powerful in the original. When John the Baptist was very likely not speaking Greek. We have the Bible is in Greek because the Jews rejected Christ. The Greeks accepted Christ, although I don't agree entirely with how they understand things, but they accepted Christ, and God gave them the New Testament to preserve, and they preserved it in Greek. But the original discussion was not in Greek. So he told them, I can take Avanim and make Banim to Abraham. So again, it's that wordplay that you don't see in the translation. So hopefully this helps you to see, how much there is, when you dig in, and how you can appreciate more just the beauty of the presentation, how it's presented. Now, from there, I want to go into mathematics. I've talked about literature a little bit. If I have time, I'll talk about it more. I need to see what the time is now. Okay. I'm now going to go into numerics a little bit. And there we have the principle of gematria, which is a Greek term taken into Hebrew. And it has to do with the fact that the Hebrew letters are also numbers. And so the Jews, when they read the Bible, they are very interested in the numerical value of the words. Are you with me? And that's called gematria. Now, in Greek, it's called isopsephy. When you talk about the Greek, sometimes you use gematria for the Greek as well, but there's also the term isopsephy, isopsephy, isopsephy. So the Greek letters also are numbers, and so also the New Testament has numerics in it. Are you with me? So I want to cover a little bit of numerics with you and see how it plays out. Let's go to Proverbs, the 10th chapter. Well, first I want to go to Psalm 118. Psalm 118. And I know it's late at night. I'm dumping a lot of material on you, so I hope it's not burdensome. I often talk to people about the fact that of a man carrying a heavy sack, and people were saying, "Why are you carrying that heavy sack around?" Then they opened it up and it was full of jewels. Then they understood. All right, in Psalm 119, it is organized according to the Hebrew alphabet, 22 basic symbols and 8 verses for each symbol, 176 verses. So all the first 8 verses begin with Aleph in the Hebrew. All the next 8 verses begin with Bet in the Hebrew. Are you with me? Now, to save time, I'll let you do some of the math on your own. I was going to, shepherd you through the math, but I can give you enough information for you to do the math on your own to save time because I see I've gone longer than I thought I would. So let's go to Psalm 119. And the first 10 letters, okay, which takes you all the way through verse 80. Okay, we have 10 sections of 8 verses each. Aleph through Yud, which are also pronounced Yod. Are you with me? Now, those 10 letters are equal 1 through 10. Now, I'm not going to give you enough information for you to become experts. I'm just giving you enough to follow what I'm going to cover tonight. All right. Now, then the letters go by tens. Letter Kaf is equal to 20, and then 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So now we come to the letter Kuf or Kof, and that ends in verse 152. So the next verses are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. Are you with me on that? Then it begins to jump. Now, Resh is 200, Shin is 300, Tav is 400. So the last few letters, the last 4 letters are 100, 200, 300, 400. Are you with me? Okay, now I'm not going to go through the Greek tonight, but there's, you can look it up. The Greek has a system which is not unlike this. Are you with me so far? Okay, now let me show you something else. Let's go back to the original Old Testament as it was preserved in the most ancient form. And I'm going to hold something up that I hope you can see. Hopefully you can see this. Let me see. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Wonderful. This is English without vowels. Could you read it? This is English without vowels. Now, it's much harder to do that in English than it would have been in Biblical Hebrew, but the original Biblical Hebrew was written generally without vowels. They were added later. Okay, so let's take Solomon's name, Shlomo. Daniel helped me with this presentation by coming and working with Donnie so that I could do it. The technical side here. He's quite good technically, and his middle name is Solomon because that was my father's Hebrew name. Let me give you a little bit of cultural background. In America, the Jews didn't want to be too obvious, so they gave their children biblical names, but more acceptable biblical names. And then in Hebrew, they might give them a more Jewish sounding name. So my father was Samuel, but his Hebrew name was Shlomo, Solomon. Follow what I'm saying? I had an uncle Sam, but his Hebrew name was Nehemiah, Nehemiah. So the idea was don't make it too obvious, or you might be persecuted. But anyway, so Daniel's middle name is Solomon. He's named after, in that sense, after my father, who's been dead a long, long time. So anyway, so the Hebrew for Solomon is Shlomo, comes from shalom, peace, and that is Shin Lamed Mem He, because you don't have you could read it without the vowels, you would know what it is. Shlomo, it's spelled Shin Lamed Mem He, Shlomo. So that comes out to Shin is 300, Lamed is 30, so that's 330. Mem is 40, that's 370, and Hay is 5, that's 375. You can check me out. Just put down on if you're taking notes that Solomon's name is SHLMH. And you can look up the letters in Psalm 119 and you can figure out the value. SH is 300, L is 30, M is 40, and Hayes is 5, 375. And from Proverbs 10:1, let's go to Proverbs 10 and verse 1. Psalms, Proverbs. I go to Proverbs 10 and verse 1. Okay, and it says the Proverbs of Solomon, And there's a whole section here that are called Proverbs of Solomon. And there are 375 Proverbs here, the value of his name. It ends in verse 16, 22, verse 22. Let's go to verse 22 and go to verse 16. And you'll see that that's the end of that section. Notice verse 17 says, incline your ear and hear the words of the wise. So it's a separate section. Solomon's Proverbs conclude here in the 16th verse. And then the 17th verse says, incline your ear and hear the words of the wise. So from 10:1 Proverbs to 22:16 is 375 Proverbs, which happens to be the value of Solomon's name. It's interesting, at least to me, and hopefully to you. And now I want to go to Ecclesiastes, and I guess I'll finish there because it's probably getting late, and I'd like to leave time for Q&A. So I want to go to Ecclesiastes. Tremendous amount of wisdom in that book. That book is read during the 8 days during the Sukkot Shmini Atzeret, the Festival of Tabernacles, and the 8th day of Sacred Assembly. That's when it's read in the Jewish community, and it's called Kohelet in the Hebrew. And I want to go there. And since I'm back in an NKJV, it's going to be in a different place. All right. Anyway, I'll get there. So again, I'm not going to go shepherd you through it, but I'll give you enough information that if you go back to Psalm 119, you'll be able to do this on your own as a project, to entertain yourself on Shabbat. As we say in here in Central Florida, Shabbat Shalom. And I hope you'll entertain yourself by maybe going through this gematria here. So in Ecclesiastes 1, we see here the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Hevel havalim, vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Hevel havalim, hakol hevel. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And that's really the point of the book, that your life is going nowhere if you don't have a relationship with God. Your life has to have meaning, and the most effective meaning is if you have a relationship with God, because all you take out of this life is the character you've built, nothing else. So anyway, the book of Ecclesiastes is organized in two different ways. One way is you take vanity, which is Hevel. Hevel is vanity. And by the way, Abel's name, Abel didn't live long by patriarchal standards, right? His life was cut short. His life was like a vapor. So, and that's kind of the meaning of his name, Abel. But anyway, so Hevel, the book of James tells us our life is like a vapor. So anyway, if you take the word Hevel, it's Hey, Vav, and Lamed. So HBL, you can just put that down if you're taking notes. H is 5, B is 2, Lamed is 30. So it's 37. And it's here 3 times. It's here 3 times. Vanity is 3 times in that verse. That's, of course, God's number of revelation, of decisiveness. And that has come into American culture. Or we auction something, going once, going twice, going 3 times. 1, 2, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. It's in our culture. And that's another thing to realize about the Bible. Numbers have a symbolical meaning. I could go very eloquent on that. Numbers have a symbolical meaning. That 3 has a meaning, 7 has a meaning, 12 has a meaning, etc. So here it's 3 times, Hevel, Hevel, Hevel. 37 times 3 is 111, 1, 1, 1. And so the book is divided into 2 parts, 111 in each, 222 verses in all. Are you with me? You can count them up and prove me. 3, 2. And now I want to go to verse 111. Okay, and that's in the 6th chapter. I think it's the 9th verse. So that's where the first half of the book ends, and it ends what you might expect. Okay, I'm in Ecclesiastes 6:9. This is the 111th verse. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. So that's what the book's about. And that's the first half of the book, and then you have the second half. But that's one way the book is organized. And it has to do with the value of Hevel 3 times. But there's another way the book is organized. 222 verses. And you have 216 verses where you wind up with, let's go to that. Let's go to the 216th verse. And that's Ecclesiastes 12, verse 8. Hevel havalim, vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Hakol hevel, all is vanity. And that's how the book ends there. But then you have a supplement of 6 verses. 6 is the number of human beings. And this section tells you what a complete human being is to be, right? That the whole purpose of human beings, is to fear God and keep his commandments. All right. And so you have these final 6 verses here. So you have one section of 216 verses and then a final section of 6 verses. Are you with me? Okay. And now let's go back to vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Let's take a look at that passage. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Well, we know that vanity 3 times is 111, but there's more to the verse. It says vanity of vanities. So there you have the plural, havalim. So that ends with a yud and a mem. And so you add 40 to the total. I'm sorry, you add 50 to the total. Are you with me? So now from 111, you get 161. Are you with me? Now you have 161. Now you have Hakol, everything. And Hakol is HKL. Think of the Ko for Kuf as a Q. Think of it as a Q and the Kaf as a K. All right? Scholars spell words with a Ko for the Q and Kaf with a K. So H is 5, Kaf is 20, Lamed is 5. So now you add that. Hay is 5, and Kaf is 20, that's 25, and Lamed is 30. So what that should be, that's 55. Now what's 55 and 111? 216, right? Am I right? 55, let's go 111 and 55. It should come out to, it'll come out to 216. I don't have a pen here, but that's because it's 161. No, that's where I made my mistake. 161 is what we got to, right? Because it's Hevel, Havalim, Hakol Hevel. And so it's Havalim is plural. You had Yud and Mem, which is 50. So it's 161 plus 75. 161 plus 75 is 216. Did you figure it out? You can later. If just use the information I gave you. That Hevel is 37. Havalim, therefore, is 37 plus 50. And then Hakol is 5 and 30 and 20, 55. So you put it all together, you're going to get 216. And guess what? That's how many verses there are in that first section that talk about vanity. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity equals 216. And that's how many verses are there to get the point across. Then you have a supplement of 6 verses that, make sure you get the real point of the book. That it was more subtle until you get to the end, then it hits you more powerfully at the end. I hope I haven't confused you. I should have brought pencil and paper as I was doing this. I'm doing this off the top of my head. But if I've confused you, then we'll clarify it in the Q&A. So anyway, this gives you just a little bit of an idea of the kind of patterns, kind of information beneath the surface that's going on when you study the Bible. And I want to give you one more, if I may dare to give you one more. And then hopefully you can ask questions. And actually, I've only gone about an hour, right? Because we started around 8:30, so that's great. So I want to give you one that'll be simpler. And so if I've confused you, take a deep breath. This will be easier. I go to Matthew 1. And you know enough about the Bible to understand that Jesus Christ had to be a descendant of David to be the Messiah. Now, here was the Logos. He had to be divine to be our Savior. Because if you read the Bible, only God can be our Savior. So he had to be divine, but he also had to be human to be the Messiah. See, he's both Messiah and Savior. The Jews were looking for a Messiah. They weren't looking for a Savior. They didn't understand that. Well, they will eventually, and then they'll understand that Jesus is both Davidic and divine. Anyway, so you go to Matthew, and Matthew is discussing the genealogy of Jesus Christ legally by his father, and that's important. Even though his father even though he gets his human nature from his mother, Mary, she's also a descendant of David, but his father needs to be a descendant of David for legal purposes. He's the only human who could be called his father, even though he was his adoptive father, but he still had to be a descendant of David. Are you with me? So if you look at the genealogy in Matthew, let's go to the where the genealogy is summarized here. And I want to go to verse 17, Matthew 1, verse 17, where the genealogy is summarized. And by the way, speaking of summarized, let's go back to Amos 8:1. Maybe you would understand the pun there about Caius and Cates if I say this: during the summer, I will summarize my beliefs. So, that's kind of what happened in Amos 8 with Caius and Cates. All right, let's go back now to Matthew. All right, so in Matthew 1 and verse 17, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. And from David and the captivity in Babylon are 14 generations. And from the captivity in Babylon until the Christ are 14 generations. 14, 14, 14, three times. That's 42, which is 6 times 7. 7 is God's number of completeness, but 3 is a number of decisiveness. 14, 14, 14. Why? Because he's a descendant of David. David's name in Hebrew is spelled Daled Vav Daled, David. Actually, in ancient times, it was pronounced as a W. David, Daled Vav Daled. Now, Daled is 4, Vav is 6, Daled is 4. That's 8 and 6 is 14. So David's name in Hebrew, in Gematria, it equals 14. So an Orthodox Jew reading this passage, it's going to hit him. 14, 14, 14. In other words, it's a way of emphasizing the Davidic ancestry of Jesus Christ, even though it's here plain, but it's just another way of emphasizing it. And that leads me to one more thing I want to cover, but not in great depth. But I'm forced to, based upon what I just said. And in the old days, when I gave Bible studies, they went 90 minutes. I'm not going to go that long because I want to have Q&A. But I want to say one more thing that the Bible does. Emphasis is the most effective. Repetition is the most important factor in emphasizing something. Repetition is the most important factor in emphasizing something. See, I said it twice to get the point across. So, but the Bible does it poetically. Now, Hebrew poetry is not so much based on rhyme. The Hebrew language has a natural rhyme because of the grammar, like Spanish has. And so Hebrew has a natural rhyme pattern in the language because of the grammar. But Hebrew poetry is based on rhyming ideas. And it's based on saying something and then saying it again, but in a different way so that it's not boring, but still to emphasize the point. So Hebrew poetry is saying the same thing twice, but in a different way. So sometimes when you see "and," it's not like saying "and" like it's something different. It's like saying, I'm the chancellor of the university, and I'm the one who decides what must go on. You're really just saying the same thing. It's not like you added anything. So "and" doesn't always mean something different. It means sometimes I'm just emphasizing what I've already said. Are you with me? So let's go to one example of parallelism, and you'll see what I mean. And how I want to go to Genesis 49. What Jacob says about what he's going to do to Levi and Simeon. Okay, Genesis 49. And I want what he says about Simeon here. Okay. I want to go to what he says he's going to do to them, and I want to go to verse 7 and the final part. He says, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So you could also say, I will scatter them. It's just that the translator didn't want to repeat, I will, but the I will was implied in the Hebrew. So, and he says, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So he said the same thing twice, but in a different way. And that's parallelism, and it's part of Hebrew poetry. And notice the first part, cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. See, so the wrath went with anger, and the cruel went with fierce. So it's similar. This is incomplete, because he didn't repeat the word cursed, but it's implied. So this is an incomplete parallelism, but it's still a parallelism. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath for it is cruel. So if you're looking at the Hebrew Bible, a lot of times you have this poetic pattern of parallelism. So you do it by A prime, B prime. I will divide them in Jacob I will divide them A in Jacob B and scatter them B prime in I'm sorry and scatter them A prime in Israel B prime. Let's do that again. I will divide them A prime in Israel B prime and scatter them B prime A prime in Israel B prime. Let's start all over again because I made a mistake. That's not the way to do it. I will divide them A in Jacob B. Now I got it right. If you're taking notes, just cross out what you just wrote. All right. I will divide them A in Jacob B and scatter them A prime in Israel B prime. Okay. So you have A, B, A prime, B prime. Now it's clear. And that parallelism you find throughout the Bible. But often the Bible has a different kind of parallelism, like an X. And that's based on the way that scholars talk about it is they take the Greek letter chi, which some people pronounce chi, I guess, but in Greek it's chi, and it looks like an X. And so it's called a chiasm, 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 or chiastic, Chiastic, chiastic parallelism. Are you with me? So you have A, right, and B, but then B prime is here and A prime is here. So it goes A, B, and then B is repeated, and then A. So it goes A, B, B prime, A prime. I hope that didn't confuse you, but the pattern is like an X. You have A, B, and then A prime, and then B prime. So it's like an X, or the letter chi in Greek. So it's called a chiasm or chiastic. I want to just give you one example of that in Psalm 51, which is very familiar to you. So let's go to Psalm 51. I believe I'll find it there. And whole books of the Bible are organized that way. One commentary that would help you in that regard is Bullinger Companion Bible. He shows how entire books are organized that way, based on chiasm. Elements of the book, like are that organized that way sometimes, and whole sections of the Bible are organized that way sometimes. But let's go to Psalm 51. Psalm 51. All right. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness. So A is have mercy upon me, O God. That's A. B, according to your loving kindness. Now B prime, according to the multitude of your mercies. Now A prime, blot out my transgressions. See, it's basically a parallelism, right? Have mercy upon me, O God. A, according to your loving kindness. B, according to the multitude of your tender mercies. B prime, blot out my transgressions. A prime. So that goes A, B, B prime, A prime. That's called a chiastic parallelism. There's all types of parallelisms. I've given you two. One is called synonymous, where they're the same, complete or incomplete, which I gave you. I gave you an incomplete one and a complete one in Genesis 49. And now I'm giving you a chiasm, a chiastic parallelism in Psalm 51. And that's a whole area of study you can get into, is Hebrew poetry and parallelism. And sometimes you find that in the New Testament, and scholars call that a Hebraism. It's when the authors writing in Greek nevertheless use that Hebrew pattern of repeating something, saying something in another way. And so when scholars come across it in the New Testament, they call it a Hebraism, because after all, most of the authors of the New Testament were Jews, and one of them was trained by the top rabbi of his day. Paul was studied under Gamaliel. The one Gentile author is Luke, Luke the physician. But other than that, so you do see that influence at times also in the New Testament. So I hope that I've shown you that you never really can exhaust your study of the Bible. There's always more to learn, more to know. And even beyond what I've shown you, there are numerical patterns that you practically need a computer to find, and people sometimes have analyzed it, and so there's been some difference of opinion about how far to go into that. But were studies done using computers, and they found if you skip so many letters, you have certain patterns, where maybe God's name is spelled out or something like that. So that's a whole other subject. But since that came up, though, I will do one more thing. Uh, I apologize, but I just keep thinking of things to cover. And so I'm going to go to Psalm 96. And this is easy again to know. Um, in Psalm 96, you have what we call an acrostic pattern. That is where the first letters of the words spell out a word. All right. You have abbreviations. For some reason there was an organization that was really popular in the 60s called CORE, CORE, Congress for Racial Equality. And there's all kinds of organizations like that. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Well, you have that in Psalm 96 and verse 11. It says, "Let the heavens rejoice, let the earth be glad, let the sea roar in all its fullness." All right. And in the Hebrew, this is a very popular song in Israel among Hebrew speakers. It's a very popular song to sing. But anyways, Yishmechu Hashamayim V'tagel Haaretz. So it's Yishmechu Yud Hashamayim Hey V'tagel Vav Haaretz Hey Yud Hey Vav Hey. So the saying, "Let the heavens rejoice and let the earth be glad," is an acrostic for YHWH, God's name. Okay. And then it says, "Let the sea roar in all its fullness." So that's Yiram Hayam, Yiram Hayam Umlo O. There's three words in the Hebrew. Yiram Hayam Umlo O, which is Yud He Vav, which is Yahu, which is another form of God's name. For example, Jeremiah is Yirmiyahu, Isaiah is Yeshayahu. So this final part, the sea roar in all its fullness, is Yud He Vav, and that's another form of God's name. So you have Yud He Vav He, Yud He Vav as an acrostic at this particular verse, Psalm 96:11. So again, if you go back to the original, you can see that, and you didn't have to know it, but it just just appreciate, it increases your appreciation for the text and for the author of the text. So hopefully I've made my point, and Q&A. I hope I haven't confused, and if I have, we can clarify it in the Q&A. So let's go into Q&A. I hope this has been helpful, and that it was information a lot of you maybe weren't aware of before or hadn't heard in a long time.
Okay. At this time, is there any questions or comments? Okay, John, Dr. Merritt?
It's good to hear Dr. Kaplan again. Been a long time. Just one thought that come on that last verse there in Psalms 96:11. You had the acoustics there. You had Yod Hey Vav Hey, and then the next one was Yod Hey Vav. And that reminded me, there's the curse tablet that was found in that was found in Mount Ebal last year, and it had, interesting enough, on that it had the Yod Hey Vav, and Dr. Strickland says that sometimes in the tetragrammaton, it only turns to be three times, and this is maybe one of those examples.
I really, it's always wonderful to have Dr. Merritt in the audience because he always had something really, really helpful. One time I was giving a talk in Panama City Beach. I was giving a talk up there, I think it was, and Dr. Merritt was in the audience, and I was talking about another thing that happens in the Hebrew Bible. And I'll say something about it now because of Dr. Merritt and the question he just asked, the comment he just made. If you don't mind, I'm going to elaborate. there is another technique that's used in the Bible, where you have a code where the last letter of the alphabet is matched with the first letter. First letter is matched with the last letter, and the second to the last letter is the second letter is matched to the second to the last letter, and so on. In other words, it's like A becomes Z and B becomes Y. It's like as B. All right. For example, I could tell you we're going to the all. That's a code word for zoo, ZOO. But ALL is the reverse of that. Everybody follow that? That's A equals Z, B equals Y. So Jeremiah used that code in some of the verses in the book of Jeremiah, and in the Hebrew it's called Atbash. Aleph equals Tav, and Bet equals Shin. And Jeremiah used that code in the 25th chapter and in the 51st chapter. So if you study those chapters with a good commentary, you'll see what I mean. And I was giving a talk on that, and Dr. Merritt added something at the end of the talk, that some text had been discovered which was also using Atbash. And the Atbash can be used in the Hebrew calendar, but that would be a whole other lecture. But maybe if Dr. Merritt will contact me, I've been wanting for years to show him how he can use Atbash in connection to the Hebrew calendar. So after this study, sometime in the next couple of days, let's talk, and I'll give you that material if I haven't. I don't think I have, and I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it'd be interesting to give you that material.
Yeah, and I like that. Yes. Mhm.
Good. All right.
Bill
Now, the
Hillenbrand?
Atbash is not, I don't see it being used anywhere else, except in that one section of Jeremiah. For some reason, he decided to do that. He does some interesting things. For example, since I'm in Jeremiah, I want to go to the 10th chapter of Jeremiah. And there's something interesting there. Jeremiah is written in Hebrew. He's writing to the Jews who were still speaking Hebrew back then, and they were going to be conquered by the Chaldeans who spoke Aramaic, and they were going to be taken into captivity. And after the captivity, Aramaic gradually became their spoken language. So Jesus Christ, when he had a conversation, was probably speaking Aramaic. Is everybody with me? So he's speaking Hebrew, but at the same time, they're going to be punished by an empire that speaks Aramaic. And Aramaic is a language similar to Hebrew, and some of the Hebrew Bible is written in Aramaic because the same alphabet can be used. The Hebrew alphabet used in the Old Testament is the same for the biblical Aramaic. Same alphabet is used. Is everybody with me so far? So here Jeremiah is speaking, and I want to go to the 10th verse. But the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. At his wrath, the earth will tremble, and the nations will not be able to endure his indignation. Then he switches languages and he goes to Aramaic. This verse is not in Hebrew, the next verse is in Aramaic. Thus you shall say to them, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth shall perish from the earth and from under these heavens. So he says that in Aramaic. So the Chaldeans, if they're eavesdropping, they'll get the point that they're eventually going to be judged as well. So thus shall you say to them, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth shall perish from the earth and from under these heavens. Then the next verse is back in Hebrew again. Next verse is back in Hebrew again. So there's one verse sticks out in Aramaic. It's just like if I'm speaking to you in English and suddenly I begin to switch to Spanish, then I go back to English again. It would have an impact on you. So John Merritt, has caused me to read that verse. So thank you.
I have a question, and I'm going to bring up my Bible Works here. We'll share it.
Is this Donnie?
This is Don Wales speaking. Yes.
How are you, health-wise?
I'm holding my own at the moment.
All right. Well, I'll continue to pray for you.
That'd be great. Monday I go in to have one of my wrists fixed. Carpal tunnel. We're doing they've got a new ultrasound guided surgery that's far less involved. And yeah. Okay, we'll share my Bible Works here. I have a question. This might Uh, okay, that, share. Okay, we should be seeing me change this to the other screen here. Why
Something
don't-
happened where the pictures are, oh, actually, you're showing me something. All right. You're showing me Olive.
Yes, I'm just trying to,
All the,
just-
yeah,
Aleph is the first letter that you're talking about.
all of those verses.
Down here it's Bet.
Yes, the first 8 verses all begin with Aleph. All of those
Okay.
8 verses, 1 through 8, begin with Aleph. Then the next 8 all begin with Bet.
Okay.
See,
That's why I wanted to clear up, because I didn't understand what you were talking about, but now I see, and I'm showing everybody else and me have the same confusion I did. Here's Bet, and then
and those 8 verses begin with Bet. The next 8 verses begin with Gimel. That's called an acrostic psalm. There are others. There are altogether 12 acrostic passages in the Bible. There's one that's really obvious. The Book of Lamentations, the first 4 chapters. They go according to the Hebrew alphabet. That's why there's 22 verses in each chapter. Although the third one has 66, because there's 3 verses per letter.
okay.
And then finally, the 5th chapter is just all over the map, but they kept the 22 number, even though it's not alphabetical. But the first 4 are alphabetically organized. They're acrostic. And a very famous acrostic is Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman. There's 22 verses there, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, to make it easier to memorize and to show that this is a thorough discussion of the virtuous woman. And Orthodox Jewish men recite this or sing this to their wives on Friday evening. And it's another acrostic passage. There's 5 of those. Proverbs 31, the last 22 verses, and then Lamentations 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5. But there's also 7 Psalms that are acrostic. And the most complete one is Psalm 119, where you have 8 verses per letter times 22, 176 verses. And I'll tell you a story that I hope will entertain you. In my young youth, I was attending synagogue in Fairfield, Connecticut, and on Sabbath afternoon, we would get together for a meal between the afternoon service and the evening service, which ended the Sabbath. There's a third meal that Orthodox Jews have together in the synagogue before the evening service on Saturday night. So we would get together for that third meal, and we had guests who were Egyptian Jews. And see, we were Ashkenazic Jews, they're Sephardic Jews. And so we said, what do you guys do on Shabbat? And so they said, we read the Psalms. We read through Psalms. So we said, okay, go ahead and read a Psalm. And so he turns to Psalm 119. And we thought he'd never end. So at some point we just said, thank you. And, we didn't want him to read 176 verses. Too much. Anyway.
Well, he was probably trained by Dr. Waterhouse.
Hmm?
He was probably trained by Mr. Waterhouse. Tagore?
Hi, Mark. Thank you for the presentation. And paronomersia, I'm saying correctly, paronomersia, which you introduced today, is similar sounding words, but the meanings are different, but they fit together in the rhyme. So that's a poetic Hebrew expressions. And you mentioned they're
Let me
poetic.
spell the word because I may have misspelled it. It is P-A-R-O-N-A. I'm sorry, O-N-O-M-A-S-I-A. Yeah, now I have it right.
Paronomersia.
Because I said it incorrectly before, and then maybe maybe Donnie can edit it, but paranomasia, that's what it looks like. Could you see that?
You spelled it correctly. I double checked in Bullinger's Appendix 6, where he documented the figures of speech.
Oh, he talks about it? Good.
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
essentially, these Hebraisms, you also covered Hebrew parallelism, and these are poetic, beautiful, and easy to remember, and a form of emphasis. You are
It's
emphasizing
also
certain
concepts
concepts.
that are related. It helps you to see to see when concepts are related to. So when you people when for example, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So it shows you what Jacob and Israel are used as parallel. Sometimes the Bible speaks of the people of Jacob and sometimes the people of Israel, because Jacob had his name changed, so he had both names.
Yeah, I see that. Appreciate the insight that you have provided today. And my question, follow-up question to what you have explained to us. Uh, for us English readers who do not know Hebrew, uh, we miss all these points, the poetry, emphasis. Do we also miss any theological significance of these things?
No, that's what I'm saying. No, nothing that's critical to you can be saved from any translation of the Bible. We had a Greek scholar who's not alive anymore, but he was a friend of mine. And he basically said, any standard translation of the Bible, you can come to salvation just by reading, whatever NIV, NKJV, our NRSV, whatever it is. From any standard translation of the Bible, you can come to salvation. You're not, but however, it can reinforce, it can deepen your understanding, it can reinforce your understanding. Obviously, the when there's something written in the original is never perfectly translated into some other language, because there's all kinds of baggage, cultural baggage that comes with it, and some, and so, um, but you've had great spiritual leaders who probably didn't know any of these languages, you know, all through history. We had God's church, and not necessarily did they know the original languages, but if they had access to a translation of the Bible, they could go with it. Yeah, so I don't think that you're missing, um, I don't think you're missing critical theological truths. It's just that you could probably support them more fully, reinforce them more effectively with the original languages. But I don't think you're missing something.
Thank you.
You think about it, God wouldn't have wanted it that way, that you're missing something. He would want you to go to people who had an understanding of the languages for a fuller understanding, but not a spiritually critical thing. That would
Thank
be
you. That's such a relief. Such a relief, what you said. Yeah. Uh, I have one follow-up question. Can you clarify the difference between Aramaic and Hebrew?
They're completely different languages. They're just closely related. Think about Spanish and Portuguese. It's Spanish and Italian, Spanish and French. They're written with the same alphabet in the Bible, but they're different languages, different grammar, different. They're similar. Arabic and Hebrew are similar. They're called Semitic languages because they're from the same family of languages, which scholars call Semitic. And they're Middle Eastern languages: Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, and there's an ancient language in Ethiopia called Ethiopic, and there's a form of it called Ge'ez. That's also actually a Semitic language, uh, and the scriptures that the Ethiopians use are, I believe, are preserved in that language. And if you go to a Brown Driver and Briggs lexicon, it'll give you the Hebrew word, and it'll give you an Arabic translation, an Aramaic translation. It'll give you an Ethiopic, whatever would be helpful in understanding the word, because they're all related languages. Let me give you one example of that, which will be helpful to you, and that is in Genesis 31. Um, and that is where they make a deal, they make a pact, Jacob and Laban. Laban came from north of Israel and he spoke Aramaic, whereas Jacob spoke Hebrew, which is a Canaanite dialect. And so when they made a pact, we go to verse 46 of Genesis 31. I want to go to verse 46. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones This is Genesis 31:46. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap. And they ate there on the heap. And Laban called the heap Yigar Sa'adutha, which is heap of witness in Aramaic. But Jacob called it Galeed, heap of witness. That's Hebrew. See, Yigar Sa'adutha is Aramaic, and Galeed is Hebrew, because Laban was speaking Aramaic. And Jacob may have known some Aramaic, and then when he got up there, he would have learned more. But he probably spoke Hebrew to Jacob, his father. But he may have picked up Aramaic. But anyway, he would have picked up more of it when he got up there. But you see how different they are. Yigar Sa'adutha is Aramaic, Galeed is Hebrew.
More like Portuguese and Spanish.
Yeah,
Somewhat you can understand, but they are not identical.
correct. That's correct.
So
Yeah.
when you say Hebrew Bible or Hebrew Old Testament, you open that, you read from right to left. What is that language? Is it Aramaic or Hebrew?
Almost all of it is Hebrew. I can show you what parts are not, but
Probably Daniel is Aramaic.
not all of it. Some of it is. Some
I
of
see.
Ezra is. And Jeremiah 10:11 is. And this Yigar Tzadutha is. There's four parts of the Bible in Aramaic. There's this word, this phrase here, Yigar Tzadutha. And then there's Jeremiah 10:11. And then there's the middle of the book of Daniel. And I'll show you that in just a minute. And then there's parts of Ezra. That's where the Aramaic comes in. And so when we say Hebrew Bible, it's almost all Hebrew. There are four portions in Aramaic written with the same alphabet. And I'll show you if you want to in just a minute. It might be interesting to you. I want to go to Daniel and you show you how it's very interesting where the Aramaic starts. All right. So we want to go to Daniel 6. No, Daniel 2 rather. And it starts in Hebrew. You read Aramaic right to left as well. You read Arabic right to left as well. Semitic languages are written right to left. Semitic languages are written right to left. Anyway, so in Daniel 2, they're talking to the king. Let's see, where is he? Where does he? Okay. All right, let's go to Daniel 2, verse 4.
Okay.
The second half of that verse, it begins the Aramaic part. So it's Daniel 2, 4b, lowercase b, 2, 4b. Here's what happens. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. Oh, king. That part's in Aramaic. The word king is in Aramaic. So the middle of Daniel, the middle of a verse, begins to be in Aramaic. And that continues until the end of chapter 6. And then in chapter 7, you go back to Hebrew again because the subject matter is more for the church than just for general knowledge. This part of Daniel is something that God evidently wanted the Gentiles to be aware of, so he put it in Aramaic. But by the time you get back to chapter 7, I believe that's in Hebrew again. But I want to just make sure of that by going to the actual Hebrew Bible. I think it's in the and the 7th chapter where the Hebrew begins again, but I just want to check that out. So I want to go to Daniel here. And then I'll go to Ezra. It won't take that long. Okay, let's see. Daniel 6, Daniel 7. 6 is Aramaic. Yeah, so in Daniel 7, you goes back to Hebrew again. No, I'm sorry. Daniel 7 is still in Aramaic. Let me just see. Daniel 7. I think it's the 8th chapter, which goes back to Hebrew. Let's go to 8. Okay. Yeah, all right. So Daniel 7 is also in Aramaic. So it goes from 2:4b to the end of chapter 7. All right, 2:4b to the end of chapter 7. And then chapter 8 begins the Hebrew again.
Again, Hebrew.
Yeah, chapter 8 begins Hebrew again. And that's a prophecy that's related to the time of Antiochus. It's a very important prophecy. Daniel 8 is the background for the festival of Hanukkah and why we have it. There's a prophecy here that relates directly to the festival of Hanukkah, which Jesus Christ observed in John 10, as you know. So the Aramaic goes from 2:4b to the end of chapter 7, and then chapter 8 begins Hebrew again. Okay, now let's do Ezra, and that'll be the last Aramaic part. And in the book of Ezra, okay, I'll go back to the English Bible here, NKJV. And by the way, if you have good marginal notes, they should tell you these things. A good Bible with marginal notes will tell you what I'm telling you.
Actually, Net Bible is very clear.
Yeah, it's not
I pasted
esoteric.
in the chat.
It's not esoteric.
Clearly says Daniel 2:4.
Yeah,
From second portion, it
2:4b.
is Aramaic.
Yeah. Now in Ezra, when he quotes a document, when he quotes a document, okay, Ezra 7 and verse 11. This is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave Ezra the priest, the scribe, expert in the words of the commandment of the Lord and of his statutes to Israel. And here it is in Aramaic. Okay. And it continues to verse 26. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay, and it starts in verse 12 and goes to verse 26. Then when Ezra begins to pray, blessed be the Lord God of our fathers, it goes back to Hebrew. You with me?
Okay.
Now there's one other section, and that's earlier. But you see this, right? All right, there's one other section. And that begins in Ezra 4 and verse 11. It says, this is a copy of the letter that they sent him. And that begins the Aramaic then. That letter is quoted in Aramaic.
I see.
To King Artaxerxes from your servants, that's Aramaic. Okay. And that continues until you get to the Passover, and that goes back to Hebrew. So this whole material about the rebuilding of the temple and all that, that's in Aramaic, so that even the Gentiles would understand what's going on. That the Chaldean Empire authorized the Jews to rebuild their temple, and they did rebuild it and they did rededicate it. But then, when you get to the Passover celebrated in verse 19, and the descendants of the captivity kept the Passover, that goes back to Hebrew again. And the Hebrew stays until 7:11. So the Aramaic ends with verse 18 of Ezra 6, and then Hebrew begins again in verse 19. So basically, the Aramaic here in Ezra is giving information of general interest. And then when it gets more specific to the church, it goes back to Hebrew. Now, I just want to check one last thing, but I'll be happy to take a question while I'm checking. If you have any other comment to make, but a good Bible will show you that. We'll have
A couple of people waiting.
show you that.
Well, I have
What Jesus said when he was dying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, is that Aramaic?
Sabachthani is Aramaic, yeah. The Hebrew is Azaftani, and the Aramaic is Sabachthani. The Hebrew is Azaftani. If you look at Psalm 22, the Hebrew is Azaftani. See, I'll go back to that just a second. I just want to check one thing. I want to look at Ezra 7 and the 11th verse here. And then I'll go back to what you're talking about. But it's more complicated than that, so that's why I have to pause here. Let's just go to verse 11. It says, am I in Ezra? Oh, I'm in Nehemiah. No wonder. Sorry, I just want to, I don't want to be imprecise in anything I say. So I just wanted to check something out real quick. Okay, Ezra 7:11. All right, let's just, the following is the letter. Yeah, that part's in Hebrew and the actual letters in Aramaic. So verse 11 begins in Hebrew. The following is the text of the letter which King Artaxerxes gave Ezra the priest, scribe, a scholar in matters concerning the commandments of the Lord and his laws in Israel. And then after that, Artaxerxes, king of kings. In fact, in the Hebrew Bible, that's a separate verse.
Mhm.
Did they combine that in the English translations? In the Hebrew Bible, Artaxerxes begins a separate verse, the 12th verse. I think it's the second half of the 11th verse in your Bible. Maybe I'm wrong. Is everybody clear on what I said?
Yeah,
Once Artaxerxes is
King James
addressed,
is verse
that's
12.
when the Aramaic begins.
Starts with 12 in
Yeah,
English.
on King James.
It's 12?
Yeah,
Yep.
on King James.
Okay, good. All right, now I want to get to Eli. So he says, now Mark and Matthew quote it differently, which goes to show you that there are times in the Bible when it's more important for you to understand what he said rather than to get the exact as if you were tape recording it. The Bible sometimes will quote somebody and it's not worried that you hear the actual sound as you know what he said. See what I'm saying? And so, for example, it's different in Mark and in Matthew. So I want to go first to Matthew, since that comes first in the order, so I'll just do it that way. And Matthew was intended for a Jewish audience originally, people say. And anyway, we want to go to verse 27
Chapter?
and around verse 50 or so, right? Let me see.
What chapter?
Let's see. They thought he was calling for Elijah. Let me see. Isaiah, let's see, Matthew 27. Okay. All right. So we want to go to verse 46. And about the ninth hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, which is my God, Lama Sabachthani. Sabachthani is Aramaic. The Hebrew there is Azaphtani. Okay, so the first part of it maybe would be understood either way, but it would be a little different in Aramaic, as you'll see. But Eli is Hebrew, Lama why Sabachthani, that's Aramaic, and of course because he's writing in Greek, he has to translate it. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now the reason they thought he was crying out for Elijah is because he's saying Eli, Eli, and Elijah is Eliyahu. Eliyahu is Elijah. So they thought he was calling out for Eliyahu, for Elijah. Are you with me? Now, but if you go to Mark, it's going to be different. So I'm going to go to the 14th chapter of Mark. No, probably the 15th chapter. I'm sorry. I go to Mark 15 and let's go to verse, I guess it's 34. And in the ninth hour, Jesus cried out saying, Eloi, Eloi. Oh, see, that's different, but that's Aramaic now.
Mhm.
So Mark chose to use the Aramaic. I mean, it means the same thing. That just goes to show you that the Bible is not always quoting like a recording, but just so that you know what he said, the meaning of it, rather than the actual sound. All right. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. That part's the same. So possibly lama would be understandable in Aramaic, but Azaphtani would not be. So sabachthani would be evidently. So this is more Aramaic than Matthew is. Both of them use Aramaic, but Mark has more Aramaic than Matthew. And Mark's audience was evidently predominantly Gentile, according to what scholars say. They say Mark was writing more to a Roman audience. And some of them who stood by when they heard it said, look, he's calling for Elijah. Well, even if he said Eloi, Eloi, they still might have thought he was calling for Eliyahu. Either way. All right. So you understand what I'm saying? Jesus spoke a Jewish dialect of Aramaic. It was Jewish Aramaic. It was Aramaic spoken by Jews in the land of Israel. So it would have been heavily influenced by Hebrew, but his spoken language was Aramaic. His conversational language that he spoke on the street with people was Aramaic. He would have known Hebrew to study the Bible in the original, but his conversational language was Aramaic. He would have preached in Aramaic.
Okay, I have a question. Seeing that all of our Septuagint favoring people are not on tonight, I figured they would be.
Well, the Septuagint is in Greek, so
Right. So I was wondering which Greek you showed us where there's like poeticness in the Greek and they're singing the Greek and there's also singing the Hebrew. Does the Septuagint follow the Greek or does it follow the Hebrew or is it just a terrible translation in the first place? That's why I was kind of curious. Which way does it go for the numerologies and for the
There's a
poeticness?
huge Jewish community in Alexandria, like New York. New York probably has about 800,000 Jews living there. So anyway, Alexandria had a huge Jewish community. But according to Josephus, there was a time when the ruler of Egypt wanted, for his library, for his collection, he wanted the Jewish scriptures. So he imported scholars to translate. But one way or the other, we have the Septuagint, and this is a translation of the Hebrew Bible and the Aramaic part too, the Hebrew Bible into Greek. So they had the Hebrew Bible in front of them, and they translated it into Greek. Now, the text they had in front of them evidently has some differences from the way it has been preserved by the Jewish community. So there's some differences between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text, but we don't know what the original text was for the Septuagint. We can only speculate because based upon how they translated the words, we can see that there's some differences there, but they aren't critical to doctrine. They don't change doctrines.
Mhm.
They don't change the Sabbath or thou shalt not murder or whatever, but there are differences there, here and there, in fact, when I think about it, the lifespans that you see in Genesis, they're different. I think for a lot of the Old Testament, way back when in the time of Adam and those people afterwards that lived so long, I think in the Septuagint, some of them live even longer. But anyway, but it's a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and it's what Greek-speaking Jews would have used when they read the Bible. Just like nowadays, Jews in America, if they're not Orthodox, they probably don't know that much Hebrew, so they read the Bible in English. Or if they're in England, if they're in Argentina, they read it in Spanish, even though they're Jewish, but they may not know enough Hebrew to read it in the original, so they read it in a language that they understand. So the Greek-speaking Jews all around the world read the Bible in Greek for their own personal study. So it's a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. So it's useful to look at it and see what it says. And the New Testament apostles quote from it more than they do from the Masoretic. So most of their word for word quotations are from the Septuagint, because that would have been the Bible that most Greek-speaking Jews would have used. So the Gentiles who were coming along, that's the Bible they would have used. So most of the quotations in the New Testament from the Old Testament are from the Septuagint, because that would have been it also adds to our understanding in a way, because the Hebrew Bible is already here, but when you add the Septuagint, it gives you another dimension to the scripture. It kind of fills it out even more, so that you even get maybe additional understanding of the verse by the way the Septuagint interprets it. So that's a whole other subject. But you cannot say the Septuagint supersedes the Hebrew Bible, because it's a Greek translation. It's not the original text. The only original text we have is what the Jews have preserved. So you can respect it, and the New Testament quotes, as I said, most of the time it quotes it, but still it doesn't give it the same authority as the Hebrew Bible, because it's a translation.
Okay, I think I just answered my own question. I was just looking at Psalm 119 in the Septuagint. It has a totally different numbering. And the word, you mentioned the first 8 verses are the same letter. Those letters aren't in here. That's why I wanted to know if the
Septuagint,
Septuagint
19, that's
preserved
it's not
the
the same?
that stuff.
Let me check that one out, if you don't mind. Let me
Yeah,
check.
because I'm looking at Psalm
I'll check
119:1.
that out. Psalm 119 Septuagint, I'll check
Yeah,
that out.
it says Alleluia, but it says it is subnumbered 118:1, 118:2, 118:3.
Just a second.
Doesn't have the letter, for each 8 verses. It doesn't have that.
That's really, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, I'll do a real
Well,
quick.
I'm gonna look, find it in just a moment, but I'm embarrassed that I had at the age of 79 to finally find that out. I'm very embarrassed. Let me just
Well,
look
I
at,
didn't mean to embarrass you. I was curious because you
well,
have a manuscript that's written in Greek. Greek has its poetic things and its numbering, and it's translating something written in
no, I
Hebrew
want to look at
and
Psalm
Aramaic.
119. All right.
See,
Oh, yeah, it's some,
yeah, see,
oh,
119.
you're right, looking there. Oh, here's why you're off. Because in the Septuagint, it's Psalm 118. Go back to 118.
Okay, in the Septuagint. So let me speed
Yeah,
up.
go to Psalm 118. Hallelujah. Blessed are the blameless in the way. It's the same.
Okay,
It's organized the same way. 176 verses. It's just that it's 118 the way they count.
okay,
Yeah, so now I'm not embarrassed anymore.
okay. That's what I wanted to see. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So I hope nobody was confused. Good. All right.
No one was confused until Don spoke.
Pardon?
I said nobody was confused until Don spoke.
Until?
I spoke.
No, I don't think so. There
Yes,
is the way the
silence.
songs are counted in the Septuagint is a little different. It comes out to 151 instead of 150. So the sound, the count's different.
Bill, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have the Septuagint by Brenton's translation. But in his commentary, he says, at Alexandria, by the way, Mark, I was glad to hear you mention that so much of the New Testament's speakers were using the Greek. So Brenton has in his comments, at Alexandria, the Hellenistic Jews used the version and gradually attached to it the greatest possible authority. From Alexandria, it spread amongst the Jews of the dispersion, so that at the time of our Lord's birth, it was the common form in which the Old Testament scriptures had become diffused. In examining the Pentateuch of the Septuagint in connection with the Hebrew text and with the copies preserved by the Samaritans in their crooked letters, it is remarkable that very many passages, the readings of the Septuagint accord with the Samaritan copies where they differ from the Jewish. We cannot here notice the various theories which have been advanced to account for this accordance of the Septuagint with the Samaritan copies. Indeed, is not very satisfactory to enter into the details of the subject because no theory, however, has been there. But anyway, the interesting point is that, and I usually tell people, the Samaritan Torah was written in Paleo Hebrew that Moses could read. He couldn't read any of the Hebrew in Jerusalem today because they changed all the letters, right? When they
That's
came
why
out
they
of
did it. According to what I was taught, and by a scholar who some of you would recognize if I mentioned his name. But what happened was when the Jews came back from captivity, you had the Samaritans with their own religion to the north, and to separate God's religion from the north, they
Oh,
switched their alphabet. And if you notice, at the end of the Old Testament, it focuses on First and Second Chronicles, focus on the importance of Jerusalem, the importance of Judah and Levi, and that God was working there, not in the north. that he was working with Judah to the south, not the Samaritans to the north. That's a very important theme of First and Second Chronicles, because the Samaritans had their own counterfeit religion to the north. And so very likely the Jews switched their alphabet to separate their scriptures from the Samaritan scriptures. That was a point that a very scholarly man named Ernest Martin used to teach, and I would agree with him on that. I can't prove it, but I would tend to agree with him on that. But Jesus told the Samaritan woman flat out, you don't know what you worship. We know who we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. He made that
Yeah, but
clear.
the one thing
He
we
made it
have
very clear
missed,
because it was very important then and became very important later. Because I think you'll find, if you study a history of Catholicism, the reason you had Christianity deviating from God's law is because so many Samaritans were converted, and their religion was a hodgepodge, and so they kept that same pattern when they converted. They mixed the Bible with whatever other ideas they wanted to mix it with, and so you have mainstream Christianity, which I believe is coming from the Samaritans to a large degree. Where are the Samaritans today? You don't find them anymore. There's 400.
that's the reason you don't find them, is because many of those. Here's the thing we've missed in the Church of God. When the first persecution of martyr was there, Stephen, then when Philip went down to Samaria, many of the Samaritans, which Jesus had already visited, became Christians. So the ones that are left in Israel didn't become Christians, but the bulk of them. And the thing we've missed in the Church of God is that they didn't think anybody could be baptized. Peter and John went down there and helped Philip lay hands on them. They didn't think anybody could be baptized that wasn't circumcised for another 20 years. So many of those.
No, the Samaritans were circumcised.
Many of the, yes.
Samaritans
So many of the Samaritans became Christians, and what's left in Israel now is the ones that wouldn't become Christians.
But if you look at the New Testament, it's interesting. It talks about in two different places the problem of those who say they are Jews and are not. And in Christ's day, those were Samaritans. The Samaritans would claim to be Jews when it suited their purpose, and claim to be Gentiles when it suited their purpose to be Gentiles. So they claim to be Jews and we're not. Now, spiritually speaking, we're told that we are, as Christians, spiritual Jews in Romans 2. So spiritually speaking, those who claim they're Jews and are not would be people who claim to be Christian but really aren't. But it also goes back to the origins of mainstream Christianity, which I believe were in the Samaritan community to a large degree. And because the Samaritans had a mixed bag to begin with, they continue to have a mixed bag afterwards. And I think that mainstream Christianity, to some degree, is actually Samaritan. And what's interesting is that the Pope Pius XI made a comment of trying to refute anti-Semitism, and he made the comment, that Christians are Jews spiritually, but the way he worded it was interesting. He said, we can't be anti-Semitic because spiritually we are Semites. And I would tend to think that the Roman Catholic Church, to a large degree, when it started, was Chaldean. Literally, it was literally Semitic in the sense of being Chaldean. But
the other things we've missed is Jesus, when he said the first people that God gave the opportunity to know Messiah had come were the Jews. The first people that the opportunity the Messiah came were the Jews. The second, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They were the second had the opportunity to know the Messiah had come. And then but when he sent them to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, he said, go not unto the Gentiles and go not to the Samaritans. He put them in a special case. And then the next group to fully realize Messiah had come were the Samaritans. And then after Pentecost, then he said, go to the world. And that's when Peter found out about the Gentiles that didn't have to be circumcised.
Samaritans were after Pentecost as well. Acts 7 and 8 are after Pentecost. But some Samaritans believed because of the woman there in John 4. There were Samaritans that believed. Jesus had 120 disciples, and some Samaritans believed on him based on John 4. There was something else.
You're right about it being after Pentecost, but it was long afterward when Peter found out that the Gentiles didn't have to be circumcised.
Well, Acts 10, not too long. Acts 10. But anyway, I wanted to say something else in relation to a question about language. The Bible is written in three languages for the three branches of humanity. All right. Noah had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Shem gives us the Aramaic language. If you look at Genesis 10, Aram was a descendant of Shem. And so Aramaic is a language of descendants of Shem. Ham gave us Canaan, and Hebrew is a Canaanite dialect. For example, when the Egyptians are converted in Psalm 19:18, notice it says 5 cities in the land of Egypt will speak the language of Canaan, the lip of Canaan. And when the Israelites left Egypt, they left people of language strange because they were going to people whose language they could understand. They left people of language strange, the Egyptians. So anyway, Hebrew is a Canaanite dialect that comes from Ham. On the other hand, the Greeks are descendants of Javan, who is a descendant of Japheth. So the Greek language comes from Japheth. So God gave the Bible in three languages: for Ham, Hebrew; for Shem, Aramaic; for Japheth, Greek. That's just interesting to point out.